Hi all, my name is Madison, and I apologize if this is a little wonky. I've had an endlessly difficult time trying to upload this video. I would like to participate in the debate for why the US should not engage in diplomacy with Iran via the nuclear arms accord. So my position is actually that we should indeed engage in diplomacy with Iran, whether we're keeping this same deal and then renegotiating later or whatever we decide. I think it's true that we should always engage in diplomacy where possible. Especially in a world where everything is changing, I think it's really important to keep open ties and open lines of communications as much as possible with anyone. I also believe that it's the moral high ground of the United States. If we're the self-elected leader of the world for good and for change, I think it's our responsibility to negotiate and engage in diplomacy and protect our neighbors and ourselves in making sure that the nuclear arms around the world are kept in check. So a little bit of background, how did we get here? So there's decades and decades of history when talking about Iran, but to start in the 1970s with the Non-Proliferation Treaty. This treaty was meant to tamp down destructive efforts and was working well until the Iranian Revolution, when we, the United States, backed the removal of the Shah for, of course, Western ideals. We were after their resources, our ideas of religion, our ideas of democracy. It was really a selfish overthrow, if you will, and so thus Iran hated us more then than they did before. So then we skip to the early 2000s, and the UN is having a freak out and accusing Iran of re-upping their nuclear program, which led to some frightened announcements of their programs. People weren't really sure what quite to do with that. In 2008, Barack Obama took office, and he inherited an Iran that was on a fast track to nuclear weapons. After they mastered the fuel cycle and centrifuges, that there were estimates that they were capable of creating between 10 and 12 nuclear weapons at the time, and that they were just weeks from finishing it. So Obama came in and he had to ask, how do we fix this? What do we do? How can we do it quickly? How do we prevent the capacity for them to actually be able to get these weapons ever again? So he went to our big world friends and allies to create a united agreement with the backing of more than just one nation. So this was the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the JCPOA. So it was comprised of China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and Germany. And this agreement worked to slash the Iranian centrifuges to 1/3 of their original capability. And it was also used to lower their stockpiles of uranium drastically. So the inspectors that were allowed through the IAEA had unprecedented access to be on the grounds of these nuclear power plants and workspaces that we hadn't had before. So after years of back and forth on reprimands and sanctions relief, the end result finally slowed Iran's nuclear progress greatly, delaying it by years when they were thought to, again, have been weeks from full capability. So it was a dangerous situation that we tried to push pause on. The main idea behind the deal was that in 10, 15, 20 years, as the negotiations phased out, as the deals phased out, that we would have had that many years and that much more information about Iran's actions and their methods for building and operating. And then we would have been that much more capable with our previous access to fix the future problems as the world evolves around us. So the idea behind the deal wasn't to be a forever solution. It was just to really just buy us time, so that as the deal phased out, we would have those resources, that intel, that information. We could actually be involved in some way, some fashion with Iran as they were trying to become internationally relevant through nuclear weapons, if you will. So truly, we did have a good thing going, in my opinion. Just to be clear here, though, the Iranians are not good guys. They're still terrorists. They still antagonize our allies and our Navy ships. They support bad guys. They're not your mom's favorite person to have over for dinner, but they do still have structural politics, and they do still understand the art of negotiating, and they are indeed pragmatists who wish to be more integrated in the international community in the long run. So they're not dumb. They know that they need our help. They know that they need other hands in the pot, if you will, to be able to move forward on the international stage. So they're not complete isolationists. So just like our politics, of course, there are those hardliners who are more extreme, but overall there's a lot of room for growth and good communication and diplomacy when talking about Iran. And I think pulling out of this deal is a good way to trample on years of progress. So sanctions were our form of communication and pressure before the Iran nuclear deal. So we were kind of flying in the dark, trying to apply pressure where we could and move them in our direction, but without any real agreements that benefited both sides of the argument. So truly it was a wonder that we made any progress at all ever with the Iranian government in the first place, because if we remember the US's overthrow of the Shah, the Iranians were probably pretty fearful that the more involved we were in monitoring and getting access to their workings, that we would just be that much closer to again overthrowing their democratically elected leaders like we did years ago, and that we're just trying to further westernize them to our own advantage with no second thought. So the Iran nuclear deal was a feat in and of itself. So it is worth saying none of this is ever easy, but with an agreement and diplomacy, it was at least doable. So we're in a pickle now. Yet another thing to think about here is our allies and what we're doing to our relationships with them: China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, Germany, those who stood with us to create this JCPOA agreement. How we've really trampled their trust. So the Iran nuclear arms deal wasn't just for Iran's sake, it was for the sake of the safety of the world. It made everybody feel safe, and if we're just willy-nilly pulling in and out of agreements, that hurts our reputation with our allies. So that's something else to think about when we act so nonchalantly. Okay. So the deal is, again, a good idea in my opinion. I think anyone having nuclear weapons is a liability and a bad idea for themselves, for their entire region, for our country, for our regions. So, under the Iran nuclear deal, every 90 days, the administration notified Congress as to whether or not the Iranians were living up to their end of the deal. And thus far, they had been fully compliant as of 2016. However, the New York Times reported, then again in 2016, that Trump did not want to renew the deal, as he said he felt it failed to address Iran's ballistic missile program and its role in regional wars. But according to the United Nations' own watchdog, the IAEA, which stands for International Atomic Energy Agency, they were the ones responsible for monitoring Iran's obligations, that they were meeting their obligations, and that they were actually making progress in complying in their facilities and their weapons making like we had agreed. According to the IAEA, they were complying fully, and that the facilities that they could have been using to make weapons-grade material was actually changed to be used for research and industry and medical purposes, and they were benefiting their economy, that they had actually turned over these facilities to be used for economic good. So these were the reviews from the on-the-ground inspectors that were agreed upon by the United Nations under the deal. So there are those that believe that the Trump administration pulled out of the Iran deal only because it was an Obama-era negotiation, and that he would instead, of course, prefer to have his own hands on a deal with his name on it. Hopefully that's not the case, but simply put, pulling out of the Iran deal so abruptly without any second plan was a huge mistake in my opinion, and I think it sets us back years of efforts and negotiation. I think any deal is better than no deal, and getting people to come to the table in any capacity is always better than cutting off those communication ties. So I hope that our current administration or the incoming administration will make it a priority to try and repair the damage that has been done at this point. Thanks for joining my debate, and I look forward to hearing from you all.